cheating millionaire, left his pregnant wife homeless years later. She owned his company. $1 million empire doesn't always guarantee a faithful heart. In a bustling city known for startup dreams and high-stakes deals, a young entrepreneur rocketed to success, eventually gracing an article in Forbes for his unstoppable ascent. Yet, behind his penthouse doors, arrogance and deceit festered. Determined to chase every fleeting thrill, he callously forced his pregnant wife onto the streets, abandoning her without a home or a safety net. Little did he realize fate had laid a cunning trap. Years later, the same woman he thought powerless reappeared, not as a supplicant, but as the new owner of the very company he once lorded over. Keith Anderson was born in a modest Detroit suburb. His parents worked long hours, his father at a small auto parts factory, his mother as a diner waitress. Growing up, Keith could rarely afford new clothes or fancy toys. Yet, even as a child, a flicker of ambition lit his eyes. He'd watch business shows on a tiny TV, mesmerized by CEOs who strode across screens, confident and wealthy. In school, while others daydreamed of vacations, Keith obsessed over the stock market sections of the newspaper. That hunger for success propelled him to a business scholarship at a state university. He juggled part-time jobs and night classes, forging connections with fellow strivers. During this time, he met his soon-to-be wife, Sarah Marshall, a bright marketing major from a middle-class family. Soft-spoken and supportive, she saw in Keith a burning drive for a better life. Early on, they bonded over quick lunches between classes, sharing dreams of one day living beyond paycheck to paycheck. After graduation, Keith took an entry-level job in a financial consultancy, devouring every opportunity to learn. Within a few years, he struck out on his own, launching an investment firm dedicated to real estate flips and small tech startup investments. Business soared beyond expectation. Buoyed by a booming market, he turned a tidy profit. Local media praised him as an up-and-comer, the Detroit dynamo. Feeling unstoppable, Keith moved to a fancier neighborhood, upgraded to a sleek new car, and began hosting high-profile investor dinners. No longer the shy young man who believed any success was a gift, he was now certain that he was destined for greatness. During these hectic times, Sarah remained the calm center in Keith's world, offering quiet encouragement and moral stability. He proposed to her in a simple, heartfelt moment on a dock by a local lake. Soon after, they married in an intimate gathering of close friends. At first, it seemed love and ambition could coexist seamlessly. Keith soared in business, Sarah supported him, and life felt full of promise. Yet, beneath the surface, seeds of a downfall already took root. Each success fed Keith's ego. He craved bigger deals, riskier ventures, a glitzier circle of associates. His gratitude for Sarah's unwavering presence began to fade. He never suspected how that would lead to a betrayal that would sever their marriage and exile. The woman he once claimed to love, pregnant and homeless, from the world he'd built. Nor did he expect that, one day, fate would return her to reclaim everything he flaunted. Keith's early marriage to Sarah glowed with tender moments. Though frequently caught in endless networking events, he always found time for Sunday brunches, quiet evenings on the sofa, discussing future plans. Sarah believed in him wholeheartedly, celebrating every small victory like the day. Keith clinched an important real estate flip in record time. After a few fruitful years, Keith's firm Anderson Ventures made waves in the local business scene. His knack for spotting undervalued properties and managing swift renovations drove up profits. Investors flocked to him, seeing in Keith a relentless hunger reminiscent of bigger real estate moguls. He occasionally grumbled that Detroit wasn't enough, that he planned expansions in Chicago or even Manhattan. As the money poured in, Sarah noticed subtle shifts. Where once Keith expressed gratitude over dinner, he now boasted about how his genius alone secured success. She'd watch him speak with a new arrogance at fundraisers, determined to outshine older, more experienced players. Though proud of him, she quietly worried about the moral toll of racing so fast. Once she overheard him berating an employee for a minor oversight, his tone sharper than she'd ever heard. Still, their home life remained mostly peaceful, the love untainted enough that Sarah believed they could handle any storm. She began dropping hints about starting a family, visions of little ones scurrying through their large suburban house. Keith seemed receptive at first. He liked the idea of a legacy, someone to take over the empire he was building. Yet, whenever Sarah tried to discuss details, he brushed her off, citing urgent deals. Eventually, a big break arrived. A prominent bank from Chicago showed interest in funding Anderson Ventures' expansions. Keith traveled frequently, forging alliances across states. During these longer absences, Sarah realized how lonely she felt. She maintained the household, tracked daily finances, and occasionally joined her own marketing gigs to keep her skills sharp. Meanwhile, Keith's phone calls grew more terse. He boasted about lunches with top-tier investors, praising the buzz around him as if it were an unstoppable wave. The moment she discovered she was pregnant, Sarah's heart soared. She prepared an elaborate dinner, planning a sweet reveal with baby-themed decor. Keith came home late, phone glued to his ear, discussing a property led in Dallas. But when she finally told him, he broke into a wide grin, hugging her. "We'll make it work," he promised, though his eyes gleamed with a distraction that worried her. She ignored the uneasy knot in her stomach, chalking it up to nerves. No one could have guessed that within months, that vow would splinter. As Keith soared closer to the sun, a new temptation would overshadow Sarah's place at his side. The cost? Everything that once made their marriage a refuge. Keith's expansions brought him to swankier circles dinners in penthouse suites, exclusive charity galas. At one such gala, held at the Westin Book Cadillac in downtown Detroit, he was introduced to Bianca Rollins, a tall, striking blonde with an easy laugh and a reputation for turning heads. Bianca was the niece of a major developer from Chicago. She specialized in marketing high-end properties, earning commissions that dwarfed many salaries. The chemistry between Keith and Bianca sparked instantly. He found her bold ambition and effortless charm both familiar and intoxicating. Bianca's father had mentored her in real estate since she was young. She was no naive socialite, but a cunning professional who recognized opportunity. Keith, sipping champagne, listened eagerly as she described a condo project near a Chicago waterfront. They exchanged business cards, each sensing a mutual advantage. Over the following days, late-night phone calls about potential collaborations meandered into flirtatious banter. Sarah sensed an odd distance forming. Keith started returning home later, citing urgent negotiations. He took calls in separate rooms, phone angled away. The nights when he was home, he seemed restless, scanning real estate listings on his tablet while half listening to her pregnancy updates. She attempted to engage him, to remind him of prenatal appointments, but he waved her concerns aside. "I've got bigger deals to focus on," he'd say offhandedly. Sarah felt a cold knot tighten in her chest. Bianca, meanwhile, thrived on Keith's attention. She boasted about her older, wealthy lovers in the past, playfully hinting that she preferred men who aimed high. For Keith, who'd begun to see Sarah's pregnancy as a stifling chain, Bianca represented glamour and excitement. He convinced himself it was just business, just a fling, nothing serious. One night, after a boozy work dinner, Keith found himself at Bianca's apartment near the riverfront. By morning's light, Lines had been crossed irrevocably. He returned home with guilt swirling in his mind, only to see Sarah in the kitchen, preparing baby-themed decor for an upcoming gender reveal. Her glowing happiness tore at him unexpectedly. He sank into denial. This is harmless, he assured himself, rationalizing that no one would be hurt if he played his cards carefully. But secrets rarely stay buried. Over the next weeks, Keith's affair escalated, stolen rendezvous at posh hotels, euphoric at the risk. Bianca urged him to chase bigger deals, mocking the dullness of suburban life. Each new step tugged him further from Sarah's gentle devotion. Meanwhile, Sarah chalked up Keith's distraction to the stress of expansions, her patience enduring heartbreak she couldn't define. She never suspected the scale of betrayal brewing, or the merciless blow that would soon shatter her world, an eviction orchestrated by her own husband, just as she carried his unborn child. It happened on a stormy Saturday evening. Sarah was well into her second trimester. She'd spent the day organizing a surprise baby shower invitation list, hoping a small, heartwarming gathering would reawaken Keith's tenderness. Outside, rain hammered the windows. Keith marched in, soaked from a business meeting with out-of-town investors. His expression was grim, overshadowed by an unspoken fury. She approached him with concern, but he brushed her off. After a tense silence, he finally spat out the words that would unravel everything. "We're done, Sarah," he said, voice shaking with a mix of anger and twisted resolve. "I can't keep pretending this marriage works. I've met someone else, and I want you out." Sarah froze, the color draining from her face. She'd harbored quiet suspicions about his fidelity, but hearing it confirmed left her numb. "Keith," she pleaded, tears brimming, "we're having a child. How can you do this?" He refused to meet her gaze. "This child was never my plan. I can't handle it. I have bigger aspirations. Bianca understands me. She's not tying me down with domestic illusions. I'm sorry, but I can't live this lie anymore." Her heart pounded with a dizzying mix of shock and devastation. She stammered, "Where am I supposed to go? I have no job right now, no savings beyond what we share." Keith's jaw tightened. "Take whatever you need from the joint account for a few days, but that's it. I'll have the locks changed. I want you gone by Monday." The words fell like a guillotine. He turned on his heel, retreating upstairs to pack a bag for Bianca's. Sarah collapsed onto the living room sofa, sobs racking her. The child inside her kicked, as if sensing her turmoil. Unable to process the cruelty, she tried calling her parents, but they lived states away, struggling financially themselves. Friends in Detroit were mostly superficial business acquaintances of Keith's, not a support network she could rely on. The next morning, she pleaded for time to find a place, but Keith remained cold. He claimed their sprawling suburban house didn't belong to her. Anyway, she was just a passenger in his success. By Monday, she hastily stuffed clothes into suitcases, tears blurring her sight. Exhausted and terrified, she loaded her possessions into her aging sedan. Her belly cramped from stress, but she forced herself to remain steady. In the driveway, she glanced back at the house that was once her safe haven, now barred to her. Keith stood at the door, not a hint of remorse on his face. She drove off into the rain, a silent vow forming in her heart. She might be homeless, pregnant, and betrayed, but she wasn't broken. One day, she'd rise above this injustice, though at that moment she had no inkling how spectacularly fate would fulfill that promise. Sarah's car rumbled into the city, the night sky weeping from clouds that matched her despair. With no relatives nearby and limited funds, she parked in a public lot downtown, rummaging for motels to call. A crumpled note in her glove compartment was all she had, phone numbers of old college friends. She dialed a few, but none picked up. She needed a place that wouldn't cost her the last of her meager emergency stash. Eventually, she found a rundown motel that accepted her battered credit card. The room reeked of stale smoke, the sheets threadbare. Collapsing onto the bed, Sarah felt the baby stir. She whispered apologies to the unborn child, promising to keep them safe. An ache of loneliness seized her. How had the man she loved turned so cruel? She recalled sweet moments from their courtship, tears staining the thin pillow. The next few days blurred into a frantic scramble. Sarah visited social service offices, discovering wait lists for housing assistance. She considered calling Keith's office, begging for a pittance of spousal help, but shame stopped her. Instead, she sought temporary work. While scanning online boards at a library, she found a part-time office job with a small marketing startup. The pay was meager, but she latched onto it. The next challenge, where to stay once her motel funds ran out. A stroke of luck emerged when an elderly woman named Harriet, who manned the motel's front desk at nights, overheard Sarah discussing her situation. Harriet offered a sublet arrangement in her nephew's vacant apartment for a fraction of the usual rent provided. Sarah was discreet. Grateful, Sarah accepted, moving into a cramped space above a hardware store. It wasn't luxurious, but it sheltered her from the streets. Meanwhile, Keith flaunted his new relationship with Bianca. The local business community murmured about the scandal. Some disapproved, yet Keith's financial success overshadowed moral judgments. Bianca reveled in the attention, parading around in designer clothes, boasting that Keith was finalizing expansions in multiple cities. A few gossips pitied Sarah, but none openly challenged Keith's decisions. He was too powerful, too brash. Alone in her small loft, Sarah nursed a quiet determination. She refused to let this heartbreak define her destiny. She worked diligently, saving pennies. Each ultrasound appointment reminded her of the life growing inside. She'd whisper to her baby at night, "We'll make it, I promise." Though she had no illusions of an easy path, the first sparks of a fierce resilience ignited in her heart, a resilience that, unbeknownst to both her and Keith, would guide her to an extraordinary future, culminating in a day she'd stand triumphant at the helm of the very empire he won. Late autumn brought a chill to Detroit's streets. In a modest hospital room, Sarah clutched the rails of a labor bed, pain tearing through her contractions. No partner stood by her side, only a kind nurse offering gentle encouragement. Hours of anguish gave way to a moment of indescribable joy when Sarah delivered a baby boy she named Oliver. Tears of relief and love streamed down her face as she cradled him. The nurse noticed the sorrow behind her smile, sensing a deeper story. Released from the hospital with minimal fanfare, Sarah returned to the small loft. She balanced newborn care with her part-time marketing job, collapsing into exhaustion nightly. Harriet occasionally dropped by with homemade soup, while the hardware store owner gifted Sarah baby supplies from a local charity drive. Each act of kindness felt like a small miracle in a world that mostly turned a blind eye. Keith neither visited nor called. Sarah tried not to let bitterness consume her. She'd read about single mothers forging success, their grit forging new paths. She believed Oliver deserved a hopeful future. Determined to move forward, Sarah expanded her skill set, reading business publications, brushing up on modern marketing trends. She recognized that with hustle and resourcefulness, she could perhaps create a stable life for her son. She refused to be simply a victim of Keith's cruelty. Opportunity knocked when her marketing boss recognized Sarah's raw talent for understanding consumer needs. Despite her personal struggles, she delivered creative campaigns that boosted small brand awareness. He offered her a full-time position with modest benefits. Overjoyed, Sarah juggled childcare with her new responsibilities. She found a trustworthy neighbor to watch Oliver during the day, trading small chores in exchange for babysitting. Meanwhile, Keith's star soared higher. He and Bianca attended galas, posted photos from lavish getaways. A feature in a Detroit business magazine lauded him for an upcoming development project. The article omitted any mention of the wife he cast aside. Still, Keith couldn't fully dodge rumors that he'd abandoned a pregnant spouse. Some associates raised eyebrows, but as long as profits flowed, condemnation remained muted. In her loft, Sarah sighed at each new mention of Keith's success, but it no longer shattered her. She'd found an anchor in motherhood. Each night, she gazed at Oliver's sleeping form, vowing to create a future free from heartbreak and relying solely on her own strength. A quiet ambition stirred, forging goals she never considered while married. She'd build something bigger and better, fueled by the ultimate revenge, living well, achieving beyond Keith's shadow. The seeds of a remarkable transformation, one that would eventually return her to Keith's realm at the pinnacle of power, began to germinate in her determined heart. As months rolled by, Sarah's adept marketing skills earned praise from her boss and clients. Her part-time role turned into a full-time contract, then a senior position. She found satisfaction in turning struggling local companies' images around, implementing digital campaigns that increased their visibility. She eventually caught the eye of a small group of angel investors looking to support budding entrepreneurs in the Detroit area. One day, a man named Adrian Yang, an investor known for championing underdog ventures, approached Sarah at a local business networking event. He'd heard about her knack for marketing transformations. Over coffee, he asked if she'd ever considered starting her own agency. Initially startled, Sarah admitted it had crossed her mind, but she lacked the funds. Adrian suggested a meeting, explaining that his group had seed money for promising startups, especially those led by women. The idea both thrilled and terrified her. Oliver was now a rambunctious toddler, her finances still precarious. If she risked everything to found an agency, what if it failed? Adrian's calm confidence reassured her. "I've seen your work. You can do this. You already juggle responsibilities that would break lesser people." Over the next few weeks, Sarah poured herself into drafting a business plan. Late nights after Oliver's bedtime found her hunched over the kitchen table, charting out service offerings, growth projections, cost breakdowns. She hammered out a brand name, Catalyst Marketing Solutions, hoping it would catalyze local businesses into success. Adrian and his group, impressed by her thoroughness, offered a modest but adequate investment in exchange for a small equity stake. Sarah gulped, realizing this leap of faith could transform her life. She took it, handing in her notice at her marketing firm. Her boss, though sad to see her go, wished her well. Soon, Catalyst Marketing Solutions launched in a rented co-working space, with Sarah as the sole employee. She hustled for clients, leveraging connections from her prior job. Within months, she secured her first big contract from a mid-sized manufacturer rebranding for modern times. The results soared beyond expectations, netting her a glowing testimonial. Amid these personal triumphs, she rarely thought of Keith until she'd overhear news of him unveiling a new building or see him photographed with Bianca at a downtown event. Each mention poked an old wound, but the pain lessened as her new identity strengthened. Oliver, now a curly-haired bundle of laughter, motivated her each morning. Gradually, Catalyst's reputation grew. More clients rolled in. Sarah hired a small team, mostly mums returning to the workforce, creating a supportive environment she once lacked. No one, not even Sarah, suspected how a fateful twist of business synergy would soon entwine her rising agency with the enterprise Keith boasted. And in the not-too-distant future, the man who left her destitute would find himself at the mercy of her unstoppable ascendance. 2 years into Catalyst's journey, Sarah found her schedule packed with client meetings, strategy sessions, and the daily bustle of running a small but rapidly growing agency. She now employed half a dozen staff, graphic designers, social media specialists, account managers, each bringing fresh creativity under her leadership. Their success stories multiplied. A local brewery quadrupled foot traffic after an innovative campaign. A struggling fitness chain saw membership spikes with Sarah's branding pivot. Then came an unexpected inquiry. A major real estate firm was seeking marketing proposals to rejuvenate one of their stagnant property developments. The RFP request for proposal arrived with minimal details about the real estate conglomerate's identity. Intrigued by the potential big-budget project, Sarah assigned 2 staff members to investigate. They discovered the property management branch was a subsidiary of none other than Anderson Ventures' Keith's empire. The realization made Sarah's pulse spike. She paused, unsure whether to proceed. Yet, the project could catapult Catalyst into the next tier, opening national exposure. After conferring with her lead account manager, she decided to pitch anyway. Business was business, and she reasoned Keith likely had no direct involvement in day-to-day property marketing. If they won, it might be managed by separate executives. The staff prepared a polished presentation focusing on the development's potential for eco-friendly features and local community engagement, a hallmark of Catalyst's approach. On the day of the pitch, Sarah, dressed in a sharp navy suit, heart hammering. She and her team entered a sleek boardroom where 2 managers from Anderson Ventures greeted them. No sign of Keith. Sarah exhaled relief. She delivered her polished proposal, weaving in data-driven insights and creative campaign mock-ups. The managers appeared impressed, nodding thoughtfully. Another agency pitched after them. A week later, Catalyst got the call. They won the contract. Elation warred with caution. Sarah recognized the looming risk. Eventually, Keith might discover the link. But the managers who hired Catalyst were enthusiastic. They barely mentioned the CEO, referencing only mid-level approvals. Over the next months, Catalyst poured energy into reviving the property's image, unveiling a fresh brand identity and interactive events. Public interest soared. Sarah's staff gleaned that Keith rarely meddled in this arm of the company, focusing instead on bigger expansions. Still, each time Sarah signed an invoice or stepped into an Anderson Ventures building, she felt a tremor of memory, recalling how Keith once tossed her out pregnant and penniless. Now, ironically, she was boosting his profits. She considered telling the managers about her history, but withheld it. Let the results speak for themselves. Little did she know, fate was spinning another twist. For in a matter of months, crises within Anderson Ventures would erupt, drawing Keith's frantic attention to the very property that Catalyst was salvaging. And that confrontation would spark the next chapter in a destiny none of them foresaw, Sarah's unstoppable path to owning the company that once caused her greatest misery. While Catalyst's marketing magic breathed new life into the property, a storm brewed inside Anderson Ventures. Keith's aggressive expansions, fueled by the high of Bianca's encouragement and his own thirst for market dominance, were over-leveraged. A shaky commercial loan, linked to a downtown development that stalled, threatened the firm's liquidity. Investors started murmuring about leadership oversights. At first, Keith dismissed the warnings. He hosted flashy investor dinners, proclaiming new acquisitions in the pipeline. But behind closed doors, the finance team warned him that monthly cash flow barely covered interest payments, leaving little cushion for unexpected costs. A string of negative press emerged after a construction site incident revealed shady contractor practices. The fiasco tarnished the brand, spooking potential partners. Even Bianca, once enthralled by Keith's confidence, began to complain that his empire felt increasingly chaotic. She spent more time in Chicago, rumored to be quietly building alliances of her own. In an attempt to quell the panic, Keith turned his gaze to smaller branches of the company, demanding cost cuts and boosted revenue. That included the real estate unit currently employing Catalyst's services. Their success at revitalizing the property was a bright spot in an otherwise grim forecast. Keith demanded to see numbers, wanting to tout a success story to shareholders. The manager overseeing the project reported major improvements in occupancy rates, media coverage, and public buzz thanks to Catalyst Marketing Solutions. Curious about the marketing firm behind such results, Keith asked for details. When he heard the founder's name, it punched through him like a jolt of electricity. Sarah Anderson. Previously, Sarah Marshall. The manager stuttered uncertainly. Well, yes, she's the CEO. She's done wonders for the brand's reputation. Outwardly, Keith kept a calm facade, but inside, horror mingled with confusion. Sarah? My Sarah? That evening, Keith locked himself in his office. He recalled the day he cast her out, pregnant and tearful, with only a fraction of their joint funds. He'd never inquired about her fate, comforted by the idea that she'd vanish quietly. Now she was re-emerging in his company's orbit as a marketing savior. The sting of irony and guilt unsettled him. He told himself it couldn't be the same Sarah, but a quick search revealed photos from Catalyst's website. Indeed, it was her, and she looked poised, professional, exuding confidence that took his breath away. Mortified, Keith decided not to intervene yet. He'd watch from the shadows, letting her fix the property issue, but the situation was more dire than a single project's success. If the bigger expansions collapsed, Anderson Ventures might default. Desperate for a scapegoat or a saving grace, Keith weighed every option. He never guessed that Sarah was no longer the timid wife he once crushed, but a force forging alliances that might soon extend beyond marketing and into controlling stakes of the very empire he clung to. Oblivious to Keith's discovery, Sarah pressed forward with Catalyst's property campaign. The project soared, awarding her team internal accolades at Anderson Ventures. That success led other branches within the conglomerate to inquire about Catalyst's expertise. Soon, Sarah found herself juggling multiple proposals from different divisions of Anderson. She carefully assigned staff, ensuring each new contract had her personal oversight. After all, it was risky territory. One day, a conference was scheduled between Catalyst and Anderson's upper management to discuss expansions of the marketing strategy. Sarah arrived at the plush corporate tower wearing a crisp blazer, head high. She expected the usual mid-level managers. Yet, as she stepped into the glass-walled boardroom, her heart lurched. At the far end of the table, Keith Anderson stood, flipping through a file. He looked up and locked eyes with her. The room's chatter stilled instantly. Keith's expression shifted from shock to a strained composure, as if grappling with a tidal wave of memory. Sarah's heart hammered, but she inhaled, remembering how far she'd come. She approached with dignity, greeting the managers politely, ignoring Keith. The meeting commenced, discussing progress and upcoming marketing expansions. Keith listened silently, occasionally nodding at the manager's praises of Catalyst's work. Sarah presented slides calmly, forcing herself to speak confidently despite the swirl of emotion. Eventually, the meeting ended, managers filing out. Keith motioned for Sarah to remain, voice tight. "Could we talk alone?" Sarah hesitated, but nodded. Once the door closed, an uneasy hush draped the room. Keith exhaled, raking a hand through his hair. "Sarah, I never expected to see you like this," he began haltingly. She fixed him with a cool stare. "I bet you didn't. I'm just doing my job, Mr. Anderson." The formal tone stung him. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Look, I know I hurt you. I was someone else back then. The company's in trouble now, and I'm grateful for your help. But can we? We can keep this professional, Sarah cut in. That's all. The air crackled with unspoken pain. Keith swallowed, glimpsing a fierce confidence in her eyes he'd never seen before. Part of him wanted to apologize profusely, but the words died on his tongue. He managed, "Thank you for the work you've done. It means a lot to the employees. Let's leave personal matters out of it if that's your wish." Sarah nodded, gathering her laptop. As she turned to leave, Keith blurted, I never asked. The child, her jaw clenched. She shot back, "My son is healthy. That's all you need to know." Then she walked out, leaving him in a swirl of regret and confusion. The door shut, and Keith collapsed into a chair, the memory of her pregnant and homeless slicing through his composure. She was no longer the meek wife from the past. She was a woman with power, a woman who might soon hold the key to saving or ending his faltering empire. The tension between them was far from resolved, and the next confrontation loomed large on the horizon. After that tense meeting, Sarah tried to compartmentalize the upheaval of seeing Keith again. She poured energy into Catalyst's newly expanded duties for Anderson Ventures. The success of each campaign boosted the property arm's revenue, offering a glimmer of hope for the conglomerate. Yet, behind closed doors, the finance department sounded alarm bells. Major debt deadlines approached, and the capital from ongoing projects wouldn't suffice. The threat of a default soared. Keith, aware his fortress was on the brink, tried to secure emergency loans. But the tarnish on his reputation combined with industry whispers about unscrupulous deals scared off potential backers. He found himself sinking daily into despair. Bianca, seeing the writing on the wall, quietly distanced herself, rumored to be dating a wealthier figure in Europe. Investors demanded radical changes, possibly a new CEO. Keith's position teetered precariously. Observing the swirling crisis, Sarah gleaned from mid-level managers that Anderson Ventures was in dire straits. For all the success Catalyst brought to smaller real estate segments, the core expansions bled cash. She felt a complex swirl of emotions, pity for employees, many of whom treated her kindly, and a pang of personal history with the brand that once cast her aside. One afternoon, a quiet conversation with Catalyst's investor, Adrian Yang, sparked a bold idea. What if Sarah could leverage Catalyst's position to broker a controlling stake in Anderson Ventures? The concept felt audacious, but Adrian pointed out that if the company was nearing bankruptcy, its shares might be acquired cheaply. They need new leadership, someone who can rebuild trust. Adrian said, "You know the internal workings. You have relationships there." At first, Sarah balked at the notion of owning Keith's company. It felt too surreal, but she recognized the strategic potential. If she orchestrated a deal with Catalyst's backers, they might buy enough shares or the distressed debt to force a restructuring. She'd protect the employees from collapse, salvage the real estate successes, and ironically, dethrone Keith, the man who humiliated her. The more she thought about it, the more rational it seemed. Sarah convened with Adrian and a circle of supportive financiers. They mapped out potential strategies, purchasing the defaulted loans at a discount, converting them to equity, or forming alliances with existing shareholders who'd lost faith in Keith. The plan required stealth and impeccable timing, as Keith might sabotage any attempt to usurp him. Though Sarah trembled at the moral enormity of toppling her ex-husband's empire, she resolved. It wasn't mere vengeance. The employees deserved stable leadership, and Catalyst's mission aligned with uplifting local communities. If done properly, it could be a new dawn for the entire enterprise and a justice for the pregnant wife once left destitute. Eager and anxious, Sarah forged ahead, stepping onto a path that would soon transform her life and deliver Keith his ultimate reckoning. A mounting sense of dread enveloped Keith as the weeks slipped by. By all measures, Anderson Ventures hovered at the edge of insolvency. Banks threatened foreclosure on several developments. The CFO warned that payroll might be delayed if no capital injection arrived soon. Keith's once loyal lieutenants eyed him with suspicion, whispering that he'd lost control. Caught in a flurry of crisis meetings, Keith tried to exude confidence. He boasted about final negotiations for a huge private equity deal that might bail them out. In truth, every potential partner demanded majority control, effectively relegating Keith to a figurehead. His pride balked at such terms. Meanwhile, Bianca's departure left him hollow, a humiliating reminder that she'd chased luxury, not loyalty. In a desperate bid, Keith approached old investors he once alienated. They either shut their doors or offered punishing terms. With each rejection, his nights turned sleepless. Visions of losing the empire he built haunted him. Memories of Sarah fluttered unbidden. He recalled how she'd stood by him in the early days, believed in him when no one else did. Guilt gnawed, but he clung to pride, too stubborn to seek her help. Then, a glimmer of hope arrived. A contact suggested a consortium was quietly buying Anderson Ventures' debt at steep discounts. If they stepped forward to restructure, it might save the company from immediate collapse. Keith latched on to that rumor, instructing his CFO to identify these mystery purchasers. But information was murky, only that the group's lead figure was a local entrepreneur with strong ties in marketing and real estate. Puzzled, Keith struggled to identify them. With time running out, he convened a frantic board meeting. The CFO confirmed that someone had acquired a significant chunk of distressed Anderson Ventures bonds. They possessed the legal right to demand repayment or restructure the debt. The CFO delivered the bombshell. The new debt holder requested a direct discussion with the board next week. They might propose a takeover. The CFO murmured ominously. Keith's heart pounded. He demanded details, but the CFO had none. Behind the scenes, Sarah quietly finalized her plan. Through Adrian's network, the consortium had mopped up Anderson Ventures bonds for pennies on the dollar. Next, they'd present a reorganization plan, inject capital, secure ownership stakes, overhaul leadership. As Catalyst's founder, Sarah would step into the role of interim CEO if the board approved. The arrangement's final sign-off hinged on a single meeting. On that day, Keith would face the unstoppable truth. The woman he cast into the streets was about to stand before him, not as a pleading spouse, but as the potential owner of the very company he once wielded as a weapon. Fate had come full circle, and Keith had nowhere left to run. The boardroom crackled with tension. Suits from various departments filed in, faces grim. Keith, flanked by a handful of loyal executives, tapped a pen anxiously. The CFO whispered updates. "This consortium we're meeting is unstoppable. If we reject their plan, they can force us into bankruptcy." Keith's gut twisted at the thought. He braced himself as the door opened. Sarah entered, poised in a crisp black suit, accompanied by Adrian Yang and two other financiers. Gasps echoed across the room. The entire leadership recognized Catalyst's CEO, but seeing her stride in with such authority stunned them. Keith stood, fists clenched, heat flooding his cheeks. Could it be? She was the face of this takeover? Sarah's voice, calm and professional, filled the silence. "Good morning, everyone. We represent the majority holder of Anderson Ventures' distressed bonds. We're here to propose a restructuring plan that can save the company." She kept her gaze fixed on the board, avoiding direct eye contact with Keith, an icy formality that rattled him. Adrian distributed documents outlining their proposition: immediate infusion of capital to cover payroll and urgent debts, with the condition that the consortium receive controlling equity. Additionally, Catalyst would be integrated as the official marketing arm for all future developments. Key seats on the board would shift to the consortium's nominees. with Sarah as interim CEO until stability was restored. The board pored over the papers. Murmurs rose. For some, relief at any solution overshadowed the shock that it was Sarah at the helm. Others glared at Keith, silently blaming him for leading them into ruin. Keith, heart racing, finally spoke up. "This is unacceptable. You can't waltz in and dethrone me. I founded this company." Sarah's lips tightened. "You also left the company precariously over-leveraged," she replied softly. "This plan ensures employees keep their jobs and the brand we built once upon a time doesn't collapse." She paused, letting the significance of her words settle. "It's the only viable alternative to bankruptcy, Mr. Anderson." A torrent of conflicting emotions torched Keith's composure. Fury, shame, a flicker of grudging respect that she orchestrated such a bold move. The board, battered by months of crises, whispered about the terms. The CFO admitted privately that this was the best rescue they'd seen. Slowly, heads began nodding. The final vote was called. One by one, directors raised their hands in favor of the takeover. Only Keith abstained, glowering in defeat. With a trembling voice, the board chair announced acceptance of the plan. Sarah nodded, expression carefully schooled. "Thank you. We'll finalize details with legal counsel immediately." Then she turned to Keith. "I'm willing to let you remain as an advisor, focusing on your initial specialty, real estate scouting. But the final call rests with me now." Keith stared at her, speechless. The woman he once humiliated was now stepping into his corner office, on the cusp of owning what he believed no one could wrest away. Fate had indeed played its hand, and the next steps, how each of them handled this power shift, would define their story's final resolution. After the takeover meeting, everything moved swiftly. Lawyers hammered out contracts, transferring control of Anderson Ventures to the consortium fronted by Sarah and Adrian. The press latched onto the dramatic story. A local marketing genius, once rumored to be ex-wife to the embattled Keith Anderson, was saving his company from financial ruin. Journalists sniffed around for details of their personal history, but Sarah strictly enforced her privacy. Keith, stripped of his CEO authority, retreated to his corner office, which felt stiflingly small now. He had the title of real estate strategist, a role Sarah offered with mild pity, but also to ease the board's acceptance, ensuring continuity with certain long-time clients. Each day, he trudged in, head low, watching staff pay reverence to Sarah as they once did to him. Some employees quietly celebrated the leadership change, praising Sarah's calm approach to reorganization. Outside, Bianca's name no longer accompanied his. She was rumored to have relocated to Paris with a new partner. Keith felt a hollow bitterness, realizing how ephemeral her loyalty was. He tried to keep his distance from Sarah, but they inevitably crossed paths for project updates. In these brief interactions, he glimpsed a side of her he'd never fully appreciated: poised confidence tempered by empathy. She advocated for employee welfare, restructured operations fairly, and tackled daily crises with unwavering grace. One afternoon, as the sun set behind the city skyline, Keith found Sarah alone in the newly minted CEO's office. Stacks of paperwork covered her desk, a half-eaten sandwich beside her laptop. He cleared his throat awkwardly. "I wanted to check how the Redwood Park project is going," he mumbled. Sarah motioned for him to sit. She updated him on marketing progress, the synergy with newly allocated funds. Then an unsteady silence settled. He gathered courage. "I regret everything I did to you, Sarah," he whispered. "I was blinded by ego, chasing illusions. Did you manage okay?" She gazed at him, memories flickering of the nights. She spent homeless, pregnant, the heartbreak of deliverance alone. "I survived. Because I had to," she replied evenly. "Oliver's well, in case you wonder. He's 3, bright and curious. Keith's eyes misted. "I'd like to see him someday if you'd allow." She considered it, tears pressing at her own eyes. "He deserves to know his father, but only if you come with honesty. I won't let him be hurt." Keith nodded, voice catching. "I promise, if you'd give me that chance." They parted with a faint glimmer of reconciliation. Sarah carried the weight of the empire now, forging new partnerships, ensuring thousands of employees retained security. Keith lingered in the background, struggling with guilt and humility. For Sarah, the immediate future demanded resilience and vision. She was no longer that helpless wife, she was a mother, a CEO, a triumphant figure who rose from ashes to claim what was once denied her. Only one final step remained: the official unveiling of Sarah Anderson as the new face of the company, a public statement that the tide had turned irreversibly. 2 months later, the newly rebranded Anderson Catalyst Holdings held a press conference. Local reporters, curious investors, and employees crowded the event space. At the podium stood Sarah, clad in a refined suit, a gentle smile lighting her face. Behind her, a banner displayed the merged logos, symbolizing a renaissance for a once embattled empire. She spoke succinctly. "Today marks a fresh start. Our mission is to foster ethical growth, community engagement, and employee well-being. We'll honor the roots of Anderson Ventures while forging a path that benefits all stakeholders. This is personal for me. I believe Detroit thrives when we invest in people as much as profit." A wave of applause followed. Among the crowd, Keith stood quietly. He watched the woman he once dismissed glow with confidence. He recalled the cruel words he used to sever their marriage, the memory of forcing her out pregnant. Now, the city recognized her as a beacon of revitalization. To his surprise, he felt not resentment, but a wistful pride. She had become everything he once boasted. He'd be a true leader. Later, in a private corridor, Sarah found Keith waiting. Softly, he said, "Congratulations, Miss CEO. You've done what I never could, brought integrity alongside ambition." She smiled, tension easing. "I had to learn the hard way, Keith. But maybe it was meant to be. This city and the people here deserve a company that values them." He nodded, swallowing emotion. After a pause, he mustered, "And Oliver?" Sarah's expression softened. "He's curious about you. If you want to build a relationship, we can talk about a careful step. But no illusions, he's not an accessory. He's a child who needs consistency." Keith exhaled relief. "I understand. Thank you for even considering it. I'll do better." As the event ended, reporters clamored for interviews with Sarah. She faced cameras confidently, praising her team and the employees. When asked about Keith's role, she clarified he was consulting on real estate, a valued perspective for their expansions. The subtle acknowledgement signaled she bore no grudges in business, even if personal wounds lingered. In the hush that followed, Sarah retreated to her top-floor office, once Keith's domain, and gazed at the city lights. Her journey had stretched from pregnant and homeless, abandoned by the man she trusted most, to the unstoppable force steering the same empire that cast her aside. She thought of Oliver at home, entrusted to a kind sitter, and felt a rush of gratitude. Life, with all its heartbreak, had led her here. She had triumphed not through vengeance alone, but through perseverance, skill, and the unwavering love for her child. The next day, employees arriving at the newly rebranded building saw a plaque by the entrance, summarizing the company's new ethos. They whispered the name Sarah Anderson with respect, aware of her improbable rise. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner, Keith began forging a delicate bond with his son, one overshadowed by regret, yet offering a glimmer of redemption. For Sarah, the future stretched limitless, each day proof that from ruin can spring a grand rebirth, and that sometimes the best revenge is forging a success so radiant it eclipses every shadow from the past. Life often surprises us with its stark reversals, carving triumph out of heartbreak and redemption from betrayal. For Sarah, a woman abandoned and left homeless while bearing a child, the road to reclaiming her dignity was anything but easy. Yet through resourcefulness, unwavering resolve, and a fierce devotion to her son, she transformed her misfortune into unassailable power, ultimately becoming the proud owner of the very company that once cast her aside. Meanwhile, the millionaire who thought he owned the world discovered that arrogance and disloyalty lead to empty halls and echoes of regret. If this story of heartbreak, perseverance, and poetic justice moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We rely on your support to continue sharing tales of triumph born from life's harshest trials. Thank you for joining us in this dramatic journey. Stay tuned for more stories that shine a light on courage, resilience, and the boundless power of hope.